Spectre Divide just had its closed beta. This game is the next big tac shooter. What is a tac shooter, you say? Well, let me give you the rundown. Oh, a tactical shooter. Thanks, Wikipedia. So now that that's clear, let's discuss the new kid on the block in the tactical shooter genre, Spectre Divide. Spectre Divide is Mountaintop Studios' new 3v3 tac shooter, which has had unique direct input from Shroud, one of the best FPS players in the world. This game's primary game mode is a classic A and B site, bomb plant, and defuse. There's an economy system where you manage your weapons and loadout with limited resources. Each team plays 7 rounds as either defender or attacker before switching roles, and the first to 8 successful rounds wins the match overall. In this game, there are also abilities in the form of what they call sponsors, which provide 3 abilities in the form of utility and gadgets. However, there are no ultimates or abilities that would serve as a way to clutch a win from behind. The devs have made sure that the only true way to win will be through your skill and strategy. But where this game innovates and separates itself from the rest is in its use of what Mountaintop Studios call duality. With duality, each team of 3 players has 2 character bodies that they control and switch between in every round. The player does this with a puck that can be thrown, positioning your character on standby. With this game mechanic, it's on the player to manage and maneuver 2 character bodies, allowing for cross-map plays and a deep well of potential for skill expression. Let me just start this off by stating that I am not an experienced tactical shooter player. I didn't grow up playing Counter-Strike like a lot of people have. I am a lifelong avid first-person shooter player, specifically the more arcadey and COD variety. The run and gun, fast-paced, fight-die, respawn kind of shooter. And I never really enjoyed playing the more tactical or slow game modes like Search and Destroy either. I've played a combined total of 5 to 6 matches between Rainbow Six Siege and Valorant combined, years ago. But I just finished playing the beta for Spectre Divide, and as someone who's new to this genre, I've got some thoughts for the devs. And some tips for any other newcomers who didn't get to play and are looking forward to trying it out when it releases. I won't be explaining everything about the game in this video, just giving first impressions and feedback. So remember, this is all subjective, it's my opinion, and my intent is to offer helpful feedback for devs and players alike. If you disagree with me or your experience was different, then that's great, and I'd love to hear what it was like for you in the comments below. And while you're there, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe for more gaming content in the future. Alright, back to the video. The first area I have some thoughts about is the tutorial, which was the only thing you could play your first time booting the game up. I imagine it'll be exactly the same on release. That way everyone has to learn the basics. I thought the tutorial was quite nice in regards to properly demonstrating the game's core mechanics like duality and the kinds of gadgets or utilities you'd have from the sponsors. It also had you as an attacker and defender, so you'd experience planting a bomb and defusing it. So overall, the tutorial felt straightforward and simple yet effective in communicating the general premises and mechanics. Ironically, the tutorial being so simple doesn't necessarily convey how complex and creative you can/should be if you want to do well. It just introduces the concepts so you understand what they are, but not everything that they could be. So to that note, I guess my first tip would be to take your time in the tutorial at each step and just basically run drills of throwing the puck, switching specters, and doing it in quick succession to imitate a real game scenario. That way, you can start the muscle memory building process before being in your first real match and fumbling your controls. I did that a bit and it didn't feel nice. A suggestion I have to address that scenario of feeling like a baby deer wobbly-legged in the middle of a battlefield would be to transition from a tutorial to a bot-filled scrim match, one attacking round and one defending round, just to more accurately experience the game mechanics as well as experience the preparation phase at the beginning of each round within the time constraints of a real match. Because let me tell you, the tutorial was not enough for me to actually understand those menus and UI. The tutorial doesn't walk you through the spawn UI at the beginning of the match, only the weapon buying, but it just lets you spend time in it to decide what to buy. But once you do make a gun buy, you're on to the next step of the tutorial. Most new players probably aren't going to want to spend much time there studying how it actually works, unless they're experienced tac shooter players. The only people who'd immediately understand it are Valorant players, because it looks extremely similar. And so I, having played Valorant before and having played many FPS games, went through the tutorial without taking much time to truly understand some of the things I was seeing. Part of that was my own fault, wanting to kind of speed through the tutorial, but I know that will likely be the majority of players, especially if they have any previous FPS experience. So having a forced bot match after the tutorial would catch people like me and allow for an integrated tutorial that feels more comparable to real gameplay. Speaking of the UI, I have some thoughts about some of those screens and menus. And remember, I'm coming from the perspective of a new tactical shooter player and from the mindset of anyone new to this kind of gaming experience. Now, the weapon buy screen UI is a bit hard to comprehend quickly. The general UI appears repetitive and is easy to get lost in the design and text. Furthermore, it's not super clear what's happening when you hover over a weapon and then it switches to two weapons in the box. There's going to be two main responses from players when experiencing this the first time. They'll either just make a quick decision based on the first image they see and decide to figure out what happens after in an attempt to not run out of time in the prep phase, or they won't really be aware of their limited buy time and try to read everything to understand and run the risk of not making any purchases before the round officially starts, let alone getting to opening the map and figuring out how that screen works too. Part of the issue is that the UI has lots of gray and translucence that feels a bit uninspired and doesn't help with visual or informational clarity with all the different text on screen. A possible solution to this would be more distinguished design elements to visually separate things into groups. Another place I think the UI could be improved is the main menu. I would love for the main menu UI to use some kind of color or graphic appearance to tie it in to the gameplay visual style. It feels disjointed and disconnected from the science fiction, comic aesthetic that the game and visual media are inspired by. Most of my time actually playing matches was very enjoyable, especially after getting a handle on the mechanics and understanding the buy system, map screen, and muscle memory of switching between two bodies. There was only one thing I actually felt negatively towards beyond that awkward stage of getting used to the game. And that one thing was the bomb. As a defender, it was not obvious where the bomb was planted. There's no clear indication to tell the player which side it's planted at, just that it's planted. The only visual indication of the bomb on the minimap seemed to occur when it was in direct line of sight of you or a teammate. And if no one could get eyes on the bomb for your minimap, then you only have the bomb's beeping timer, which does help tell you which side it's at. But depending on where you are on the map when it starts, and if there's enemies at both site areas, it can be confusing to figure out exactly which site the sound is coming from. In my first few games, there were multiple instances where I went in the wrong directions because I couldn't tell which side the beeping was coming from. And maybe I'm the problem, but I'm sharing it because it is unlikely for me to be the only one to have that experience, and so for many newcomers, here's another tip. Make sure you have good headphones with stereo audio, and be mindful of your minimap while the bomb is counting down. And speaking of counting down, there is no visual bomb timer on your screen. The game tells you that time is getting close to running out with the bomb beep increasing in speed towards the end. After looking back at footage, the bomb timer seems to be a minute, but as a new player, it never felt nice not actually knowing for certain how much time I had left, whether I was defender or attacker. And my last note on this is that there's also nothing telling you how long it takes to defuse the bomb either. I'd guess 5 to 7 seconds or so, but with no bomb timer, that kind of info doesn't really help very much. So listen, I had a blast playing this game. Everything I just shared are just thoughts, not actual problems with the game, and I will most definitely be playing this again once it gets released. The gunplay felt nice, although definitely different to some of the more typical shooters I'm used to, but that's just the nature of playing multiple shooting games. They all feel a bit different, and it's not a bad thing. The duality mechanic was really fun to learn and experiment with. The maps could use a bit more when it comes to duality specific designs, but overall played very nicely and felt very different to each other. The weapon variety was nice as well, with all your key weapon types, and their futuristic designs were awesome too. All in all, I was very pleased with my experience with the beta, and would recommend it to any fan of the FPS genre. It has its learning curve for sure, but once you get a single moment of success while using duality, you're hooked and will be wanting to get better and better. For those that made it this far, thanks for watching. Let me know if you plan on playing this when it releases, and if you already have, let me know what you thought of the beta. I'll see you next time.